It was a rainy Thursday night in Charlotte, North Carolina. The kind where the sky feels heavier than usual. Like it knows something you don't, Eli Monroe had gotten off work early from the IT firm and thought he'd surprise Melanie with takeout from her favorite Thai spot. He pulled into their quiet suburban cul-de-sac with a half smile and a warm bag of curry in the passenger seat, thinking this might ease some of the weird tension that had been building lately. She'd been distant, but he chalked it up to stress. As he walked into the house, everything felt off. The living room lights were dimmed, and the faint echo of low music played from upstairs. But it wasn't their playlist. It was Jared's. He recognized the playlist because they used to blast it during college beer pong nights. Heart racing, Eli climbed the stairs 2 at a time. The door to the master bedroom wasn't just cracked, it was wide open. What he saw stopped him cold. Melanie, tangled in sheets, laughing breathlessly with Jared, his best friend since middle school. Silence collapsed the room for half a second. Then, Eli exploded. "What the actual fuck is this?" Jared froze, face pale. Melanie, to Eli's shock, didn't even flinch. She calmly reached for the robe at the foot of the bed, her expression unreadable. "Eli," Jared stammered. "Man, listen, it's not what—" Melanie cut him off. "Don't insult him," she said coldly, looking Jared dead in the eye. Then she turned to Eli and said something he'd never forget. "This didn't just happen, Eli. It was always going to happen." Those words shattered him harder than the picture frame he smashed on the floor 5 seconds later. He didn't cry. Not right away. He just stood there, breathing hard, fists clenched, as the two people who knew him best, who were supposed to protect him, stared back at him like strangers. Eli backed out of the room like it was on fire. He left the house, left the food, left the life, and that's when he knew something wasn't right. This wasn't just betrayal. It felt scripted. After that gut-wrenching scene in his bedroom, Eli didn't have many places to go, so he drove to the one place that should be felt safe. His parents' house in Winston-Salem, 2 hours from Charlotte. He didn't even call ahead. He just showed up at 11:42 p.m., soaked from the rain, trembling with rage and confusion, and still somehow hoping his parents might show him some warmth. He rang the bell twice, then again. The porch light flicked on. His mother, Diane, opened the door in her robe, eyebrows lifting in muted surprise, not concern. "Eli, what are you doing here this late?" she asked, folding her arms. He broke, right there on the doorstep. "She cheated on me, Mom, with Jared." A pause, a long one. Then calmly, "Well, I can't say I'm shocked." Inside, Eli tried to talk it out with both Diane and his father, Walter, over decaf coffee at the kitchen table. But instead of comfort, he got condescension. Instead of empathy, he got blame. "We told you from day one that girl wasn't right," Walter said, not even looking up from his crossword. "And Jared, that boy's always had eyes on what he couldn't have," Diane added. "You just refused to see it." "But I was married to her," Eli snapped. "I gave her everything." "You think I wanted this?" Walter finally looked up. "What we think is you're 34, job hopping for years, ignoring advice, and now acting surprised that your recklessness has consequences." The words felt like knives, but it was the smug, satisfied tone in his father's voice that really pierced. Why did they seem almost content? Eli didn't sleep that night. He lay awake on the old couch in the den, staring at the ceiling fan spin in slow, hypnotic circles. Something didn't feel right. They weren't just angry. They weren't just cold. They were smug, almost like they'd been waiting for this moment. And that S when a seed of doubt took root in Eli's mind. What if this wasn't just a messy betrayal? What if it was personal? Eli left his parents' house the next morning with dark circles under his eyes and a gut full of unease. Something wasn't adding up. The indifference, the timing, the cold way his mum looked at him like she was done pretending. He needed to do something, anything, to ground himself again. So he did the one thing he always relied on when the world felt too slippery. He checked the numbers. Back at his condo in Charlotte, alone and still reeling, Eli opened his laptop and logged into his joint bank accounts with Melanie. At first glance, nothing seemed wrong, but then he noticed it. Multiple cash withdrawals over the past 8 months. $1,500 here, $2,000 there, always from small banks in nearby towns. And always under his name. His blood ran cold. He checked his personal savings next. A $25,000 transfer had been made 6 weeks ago. Eli had no memory of authorizing it. The digital signature, it looked legit, but something about the IP address on the authorization pinged his instincts. It wasn't his device. It was Jared's. He recognized it from a work project they once collaborated on. A project where Jared had borrowed Eli's laptop. And it got worse. Melanie had been siphoning money for nearly a year, using spoofed emails, fake alerts, and even setting up a joint business account he never knew existed. One where he was listed as the co-founder. On paper, Eli was complicit. He sat back, stunned. Betrayal didn't just live in the bedroom. It was baked into the spreadsheets. Hidden and folded, marked tax prep and wedding memories. And then, a final twist of the knife. A folder on the desktop called For You. It had been created just a week earlier. Inside, a video file, low quality, security cam footage. Jared, at the bank, with Eli's mother. They weren't arguing. They weren't pretending. They were laughing, signing something. And just like that, Eli knew this wasn't just an affair. It was a con. By now, Eli's hands moved with cold precision. Not anger. Focus. That's what he needed. He'd spent years burying his old instincts, but now they came back like muscle memory. Quiet, sharp, dangerous. He retrieved Melanie's old iPhone from the drawer she never bothered locking. The one she used before upgrading 2 months ago. He powered it on. To her, it was just a dead device. To Eli, it was a digital crime scene. First, the photos. Dozens of them. But not of him. Candid shots of Jared. Notes scribbled on napkins. Screenshots of emails from his bank. And one damning image. A photo of Eli's social security card, taken from his office drawer. She must have snapped it months ago. He never noticed. Then the texts. Melanie had used fake contact names, like Aunt Lisa and Dentist, for her real conversations. But once Eli decrypted a simple alias using an old code he taught her years ago, irony wasn't lost on him. The truth poured out. He's still clueless. Found the retirement papers. He never moved the stocks. Once phase 3 hits, we cut him loose. His mom wants it done before summer. Phase 3. He scrolled further. Use the accident story if needed. Eli always folds under guilt. My mom thinks he'll snap by April. Do we risk it? Eli's stomach turned. They were timing his collapse, predicting his emotions like a weather report. His guilt, his loyalty, even his pain. It had all been mapped out. Then he opened the Notes app. A grocery list, a packing checklist, and hidden beneath it, a draft email. To whom it may concern. In the event of Eli Hawthorne's mental health decline, I've documented erratic behavior and concerns of self-harm. Please see attached videos. There were no attachments. Not yet. but she was preparing a narrative. They weren't just stealing his money, they were preparing to erase him. And at the very bottom of the notes, delete this draft. Eli will search my old phone eventually. Too late. It was nearly midnight when Eli parked 2 blocks down from his parents' house in Raleigh. The sky was heavy with southern humidity, and a thunderstorm rumbled in the distance. Fitting, really. He had no plan. Just instincts. And one burning question. Why did my parents look relieved when she left me? He waited. And then he saw it. Jared's car, pulling into the driveway like he'd done it 100 times before. Except this time, Eli wasn't inside, and Jared didn't knock. He used a key. Eli's jaw clenched. A minute later, the back porch light flicked on. His parents, dressed casually, drinks in hand, stepped outside. Jared followed, laughing, holding a bottle of whiskey like he belonged there. It wasn't a secret meeting. It was a reunion. Eli crept through the neighbor's yard, staying low. He pulled out his phone and recorded everything. The laughter, the easy way Jared slapped his father on the back, the way his mother leaned in close and said, "I told you." The moment she got the signature, the rest was just acting. Poor boy still thinks it was about sex. Eli's breath caught in his throat. Then his father raised his glass. Once the inheritance clears, he'll be out of the picture completely. Inheritance. Eli had almost forgotten. His grandfather's trust, set to release this year, nearly $500,000, divided between Eli and his father. Unless, of course, Eli was deemed mentally unstable or legally compromised. The clause was clear. Any sign of misconduct or instability would nullify his share and redirect it to his closest surviving kin. Eli's mother. The laughter resumed. Toasts were made, and Eli's entire reality cracked open. They didn't just want to destroy him. They wanted to replace him. Eli stood motionless outside his parents' house for a long moment, watching the lights flicker in the windows, a sickening sense of finality settling in. His world was cracking in every direction. He'd been betrayed by the ones closest to him, manipulated by the ones he trusted, and all the while, he'd been blind. But not anymore. Something within him snapped. He couldn't keep pretending. He was done mourning, done wondering why this was happening. It was time to fight back. Eli had always been different from the rest of his family. While his parents had focused on the family business, and Jared had always coasted on charm, Eli had been the quiet, driven one. The one who preferred to be in the shadows, looking for patterns others missed. He pulled out his old black notebook from the top shelf of his closet. Dusty, barely touched for years. It was his cyber intelligence handbook from his days as an analyst with the FBI. A lifetime ago, he'd walked away from that world after his marriage to Melanie. A world of tracking IPs, breaking encryption codes, and setting digital traps for criminals. But now, it was all coming back to him. As he flipped through the notebook, his fingers brushed over the notes he'd once written about building a new identity, how to disappear, how to manipulate digital footprints, how to expose corruption from the inside. His hands trembled, but it wasn't fear, it was purpose. Eli knew his enemy now. He wasn't just fighting his wife or Jared. He was fighting his family's empire. He started setting up shop in the corner of his condo, old tech equipment reappearing from the dark recesses of storage bins. He dusted off the custom-built server tower, plugged in an encrypted USB drive, and started pulling data from every unsecured account linked to him. First, Melanie's social media. It was shockingly easy to track her encrypted messages. The deeper he dug, the clearer it became. She'd been meticulously gathering information on him, gathering weaknesses he never thought to hide. Then, Jared's accounts, banking, emails, personal passwords. They weren't as secure as he thought. He dug into his old connections, calling in favors from the dark web. One call led to another, and soon, Eli was downloading the kinds of documents that should have been locked away forever. He studied the transcripts from years ago, the conversations his family had about Eli's eventual replacement. He memorized the financials, traced every withdrawal, and found the documents that proved what he suspected all along. Jared wasn't a just Melanie's affair. He was in on the entire plan, and the more he worked, the clearer it became. His past wasn't a burden. It was his weapon. The digital surveillance tools he had once developed for the government were now at his fingertips again. He was no longer the man who sat passively in the background of his own life. Eli was back in control, and he would take down anyone who thought they could tear him apart. He cracked his knuckles, eyes narrowed. The game had changed. Eli felt the chill of his condo, the hum of old servers filling the air as he sat in front of multiple screens. His eyes, bloodshot and determined, scanned the endless streams of data flashing before him. The pieces were starting to fit together, but the puzzle was uglier than he imagined. It was Melanie, it was Jared, but it was more than that, much more. The money, the manipulation, the timing, none of it was accidental. With his skills sharpening by the hour, Eli was able to trace the money flows, the bank accounts, the missing funds, all of it. It led back to a single entity, his father's trust fund, the trust that Eli had once thought was his safety net, his future, the inheritance his parents had always fought over in hushed tones. It was no longer just about money. The betrayal was deeper. Eli found a series of encrypted emails, exchanged between Melanie and an unknown third party. It wasn't just a cheating scandal. No, this was a carefully orchestrated plan, one that had been set in motion long before Melanie had even met him. The plan was laid out in meticulous detail, tracking his every move, his relationships, even his health. The truth hit him hard. Eli's marriage had never been about love. It had been about control. Melanie hadn't fallen for him. She was planted in his life to seduce him, manipulate him, and drain him dry. She was paid, but who would pay her to destroy his life? Eli sat back, his mind racing, the cold realization sinking in. This wasn't just his wife's betrayal. This was his parents' scheme. A series of documents revealed contracts, signed agreements, invoices from an offshore account. The payments started right after he received his college graduation gift from his parents, a gift that now seemed like a well-timed bribe. The more Eli connected the dots, the clearer it became. His parents had used him. They'd paid Melanie to seduce him, to isolate him, and then to take him out. But the most staggering discovery came when Eli traced the final trail. The mysterious person who had been controlling the strings all along. His father wasn't the mastermind. It was his mother. As Eli decrypted an old series of voice memos on a burner phone, the pieces fell into place. His mother's voice, calm and calculated, spoke. "We can't wait any longer. Eli's too unpredictable. If he finds out, we're ruined. But Melanie, she'll handle it. We'll have him out by his birthday. It's a clean break. If he fights back, we'll get him into treatment. It's the perfect plan." The cold realization crashed over him like a ton of bricks. His mother had orchestrated everything. Eli had always seen his mother as the cool, collected one. The one who always played the perfect wife, the doting mother. But behind the facade, she was a puppet master, pulling every string with ruthless precision. She had engineered the entire plot, using Melanie as a tool, Jared as her accomplice, and her own son as a mere pawn in her game to seize control of the family fortune. Eli closed his eyes. He could see the way she had manipulated everyone, the way she'd made him feel like the failure, the weakling, when in reality, he was the one being used. He'd been nothing more than a tool to her, but not anymore. Eli sat in the dark, the glow of his monitors casting sharp shadows on his face. The digital landscape sprawled out before him. Bank accounts, phone records, contracts, encrypted files. It was all coming together. And yet, one thread still gnawed at him. His father, the one Eli had always thought was the instigator, the one who had seemed the most obvious in his manipulation, wasn't the mastermind. That much was clear now. The truth lay in the voice memo. The one he had decrypted, late into the night, the voice that sent chills down his spine. His mother. It had been her all along, her carefully curated image as the loving, doting wife had been a mask. Beneath that mask, she was someone else entirely. A woman driven by ambition, greed, and a willingness to destroy everything, including her own son, to get what she wanted. The memory of her voice echoed in Eli's mind. We can't wait any longer. Eli's too unpredictable. If he finds out, we're ruined. But Melanie, she'll handle it. We'll have him out by his birthday. It's a clean break. If he fights back, we'll get him into treatment. It's the perfect plan. His world turned upside down. His mother had been the architect of the entire scheme. She had orchestrated the betrayal, the financial ruin, the emotional manipulation. She had planned every single detail. From the moment Eli had become her pawn, she'd been pulling every string, positioning her own family for the inevitable windfall. As he sat there, piecing together the encrypted files, he discovered more. Emails, bank transfers, legal documents, all leading to one chilling conclusion. His mother had been grooming Jared from the start. Her plans had stretched back years. Well before Melanie had come into the picture, Jared had been carefully placed as the best friend, a character that Eli trusted implicitly, the one person who could get close enough to dismantle his life. And then there was the money, Eli's inheritance. His mother had planned for the moment she could seize control of the family business. She'd always been the one pulling the strings behind the scenes, ensuring that she would be the one to benefit when Eli was finally pushed out. All she needed was to get rid of him, emotionally break him, and isolate him. And when the time was right, she would take everything. Eli's blood ran cold. Every memory he had of his mother came flooding back. Her sweet smiles, her carefully crafted words, the way she'd always been there when he needed guidance. But all of it had been a lie. She wasn't the nurturer. She was the predator. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place when Eli found a copy of his father's will, filed under an anonymous email. His father had been aware of the plan, had even supported it, but it was his mother who had orchestrated it all. She had planned to eliminate Eli from the will, leaving everything to her, with Jared as her ally, a willing partner in crime. Eli could feel his anger building, but it was different now. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about taking back control. His mother had underestimated him, thought he would be the weak link. But Eli was no longer the man she thought she could manipulate. He was the one in control now. With the evidence he'd gathered, he knew what had to be done next. He had to expose her, fully. The world needed to see what she had done. He wasn't just a victim in this story. Eli was going to turn the tables. Eli's mind raced with possibilities. It was time to make his move. The world saw Eli's downfall as nothing more than a tragic story of a man destroyed by betrayal. His face, once full of confidence, was now a shadow of itself. His eyes were sunken, his shoulders slumped. Those closest to him, the few who hadn't abandoned him, whispered behind his back about his breakdown, about how he was a shell of the man he used to be. and that was exactly the way he wanted it. No one, not even his parents or Melanie, could suspect what he was really doing. He faked it. Eli played the role of the broken man to perfection. He let his grief pour out in front of his parents. The pitiful tears, the endless apologies, the begging for their forgiveness. They had always seen him as weak, as a disappointment, so he gave them what they wanted. He gave them the version of himself that would make them feel vindicated. But behind the closed doors of his apartment, things were different. In the quiet of the night, Eli began to rebuild. He didn't need the people who had abandoned him. He didn't need his wife. He didn't need his so-called best friend. He didn't even need his parents. What he needed were the tools of the trade, the tools he'd left behind, the skills he'd buried when he walked away from his cyber intelligence career. With the help of his encrypted network, Eli reached out to old contacts from the dark web, people who dealt in information, in manipulation, and in power, the players on the other side of the law. He'd worked with them before, but never at this level. Now, he needed them to help him craft his revenge. Eli carefully planted false rumors. He set up a series of coded messages, emails, and social media posts that made it appear as though he was in hiding, that he had spiraled into a mental breakdown too deep to come back from. To everyone on the outside, he had disappeared. He used burner phones, encrypted emails, and fake identities to leak information, subtle hints about the real masterminds behind the betrayal. He shared parts of his research, carefully leaking documents that pointed toward his mother's role in orchestrating the entire affair. He made sure the evidence was undeniable, but just ambiguous enough to raise suspicion without revealing his full hand. Eli's plan wasn't to confront them yet. It was to let them think they were safe. Let them believe they had won. But Eli was playing a long game. Through his contacts, he spread the information strategically, targeting key allies, investors, lawyers, and business partners, people who had the power to bring his mother down, financially and legally. He knew his family's wealth, their empire, was tied to fragile alliances and risky investments. If he made the right move at the right moment, he could crash everything. As the weeks passed, Eli slipped into the shadows. His disappearance became part of the narrative. His mother and Jared, believing they had eliminated all threats, relaxed. They took the bait, they celebrated, but Eli wasn't done. In the dark corners of the internet, Eli worked with the best, extracting money from offshore accounts, manipulating stock prices, and funneling information to his advantage. He quietly destroyed his mother's financial empire from the inside out, piece by piece, while ensuring that the public would be ready for the full story when the time came. But there was one more thing. He needed to burn his enemies from the inside. He wasn't just going after his mother's wealth. He was going after her reputation. Once the public knew what she had done, everything she had worked for would be wiped away. It was time to make his mother and Jared pay. Not just financially, but publicly. The ultimate destruction would come when the world knew who she truly was. And when that day arrived, Eli would be standing in the shadows, watching as everything fell apart. The night of the grand inheritance party was one that Eli had marked on his calendar for months. His mother, the mastermind behind the entire betrayal, had planned it down to the last detail. An event meant to celebrate her wealth and cement her control over the family legacy. But Eli wasn't going to let it happen. His transformation was complete. Gone was the broken man who had once begged for forgiveness. Now he was sharp, focused, and unrecognizable to anyone who had once known him. He had spent months pulling strings, gathering evidence, and orchestrating his final move. The last piece of his plan was in place, and tonight, it would all come to a head. Eli walked into the party like any other guest, dressed in a tailored suit, his face calm and collected. The guests barely gave him a second glance as he slipped through the crowd, unnoticed, just as he had planned. His parents, smug and confident in their victory, mingled with the elite. Jared, his former best friend, was laughing, clinking glasses with his mother, as if they hadn't just betrayed Eli in the most unforgivable way. But Eli wasn't there to play the victim. He wasn't there to beg for redemption. He was there to expose them all. At the right moment, Eli stood up from his seat and raised his glass to get everyone's attention. For a split second, the room quieted. Then, with a calm yet piercing voice, he said, "I think it's time we all heard the truth." Everyone turned, confused. Eli had been the weak one, the fallen man. No one had expected this. No one knew the game he had been playing. "I'm sure most of you are aware of the wealth my family has accumulated over the years," Eli began, his voice steady. "But what you don't know is how it was built, or how it has been systematically stolen from the people who should have had it all along." The room fell silent as Eli clicked a remote in his hand. The screens on the walls flickered, and suddenly, evidence filled the room. Bank transfers, financial documents, photos of clandestine meetings, and a chilling video of his mother, Jared, and other family members plotting his downfall. Eli had them all, every detail, every secret, everything. Then with the final flourish, he brought up the voice recording, the one from the burner phone. His mother's voice, clear and unmistakable. Once the inheritance clears, he'll be out of the picture completely. The shock that rippled through the room was palpable. Guests whispered. Some even gasped. Eli's father stood frozen, his face draining of color. His mother, the woman who had manipulated and controlled everyone, stood in stunned silence. And then, in a desperate attempt to regain control, she opened her mouth, but it was too late. "You're finished," Eli said. The words calm, but full of finality. As the security guards approached, ready to escort her out of the building, Eli's mother tried to make a scene, but the evidence was irrefutable. Her empire had crumbled. Her wealth, her reputation, her status, all of it shattered. Jared tried to play the innocent man, but Eli wasn't done. He had recordings of their conversations, emails that showed his complicity, and even the evidence of his financial dealings with Eli's mother. He too was going down. As the police arrived to arrest Eli's mother and her accomplices, Eli stood in the background, watching the destruction he had set into motion. There was no joy in his expression, no satisfaction. This was the endgame, and the price for the years of manipulation and betrayal. But then, in the midst of the chaos, Melanie appeared. She walked toward Eli with that look, the same pleading eyes she had worn during their marriage. "Eli, please. I'm sorry. I was wrong. We can fix this. We can start over." The room fell silent again as Eli stared at her, the woman who had betrayed him in the most intimate way. She had been part of the conspiracy, part of the plan to destroy him. And yet, here she was, asking for another chance. He looked at her, his face unreadable. Then without a word, he turned to face his enemies. His final act wasn't one of vengeance. It was one of control. "I think we're done here," Eli said, his voice cold. And with that, he walked out of the party, leaving behind a trail of destruction. But with the last laugh, because the real game had just begun.